Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of Elections by Numbers. Today we are talking about the mountain state, wild, wonderful, West Virginia. We have a lot to cover today because in addition to West Virginia's 3 House congressional districts being up for election this year and the presidential election, the state is also having a senatorial election and a gubernatorial election, so let's make this introduction quick, shall we? West Virginia was formed in 1863 during the Civil War because of a significant proportion of Virginia's population being opposed to secession from the Union. So a huge chunk of the state split away, and President Abraham Lincoln ratified the state on June 20th of 1863, making it the 35th state in the country. It's also the first state to introduce a sales tax that happened in 1921, and the first state to celebrate Mother's Day in 1908. West Virginia has 3 congressional House districts, and they are all currently represented by Republicans. Each district respectively has a partisan lean of plus 19, plus 17, and plus 23 into the Republican column when compared to the national average, according to the Cook Political Report's Partisan Voting Index. To be perfectly frank, none of these districts are in play this November. Consider those numbers that I just shared with you that show that each district leans heavily Republican, and compare those to the raw House turnout numbers, which I can show you right now. So as you can see, going back to 2010, Republicans in the state of West Virginia have consistently outvoted Democrats in the state every 2 years. 2016 saw a particularly great turnout for the Republicans when they went heavily for Donald Trump, or when they went heavily against Hillary Clinton. You can go either way on that. What's also interesting to note about this graph is how the 2018 turnout for Democrats actually was higher than the Democratic turnout for 2016. This is unusual because we normally see much higher turnout during presidential years, and 2018 was obviously a midterm year. Could this be indicative of a more impressive 2020 showing for Democrats in the state of West Virginia? Well, maybe, but I'm still pretty confident that none of the 3 districts are going to flip this November, so let's make that official and put it on our first map. Mark it. And now it is time to talk about the U.S. Senate election in the state of West Virginia. Shelley Capito is running for her 2nd term in the state against an undetermined Democratic opponent. It should be noted that Capito won her first election in the state for senator by about 28% of the vote, and she actually swept all 55 counties in the state. I would say even for the state of West Virginia, that is no small feat. Are those highly impressive numbers reflected in the senatorial to House turnout ratio numbers? Well, let's bring those up and find out. And the answer to that question is yes. Capito enjoyed a voter turnout ratio of about 116% during her first election in 2014. This basically means that she received 16% more votes than the total of all 3 Republican House candidates running that year. Whereas her Democratic opponent received less than the total amount of votes cast for all 3 Democratic House candidates running that year, specifically 85% of their total votes. To be perfectly honest with you though, these ratios to me are a bit of a head scratcher. I mean, we see Democrats have the turnout ratio advantage in 2012, and then it flips to Republicans' advantage in 2014, and then back to Democrats' advantage in 2018. The back and forthy nature of these numbers is mainly due to the popularity of West Virginia's other senator, Joe Manchin. Manchin was the governor of the state from 2005 to 2010 and has high name recognition in the state. It should be noted, though, that from 2012 to 2018, his ratio advantage decreased by, about 30 points. What this says to me is that the Democrats' advantage in the Senate numbers is gradually slipping this decade. Coming back to the present, though, we have to consider Capito's approval rating as well in our equations. She is, as of this video, enjoying a plus 14 net positive approval rating in the state, which is good. So now considering the raw voter turnout accompanied with her approval rating, accompanied with the voter turnout ratios that we just looked at, let's make a calculation. Pollbot, let's see if Senator Capito is going to win again, and if so, by how much. And there you have it, Senator Capito winning a 2nd time by about 24.86% of votes. She is a popular Republican senator running in a state that views Republicans generally pretty favorably. So let's make that official and put it on our senatorial map. Mark it. So now we have 3 Republicans returning to the House. We have a Republican senator returning to the Senate. Now it is time to talk about West Virginia's gubernatorial election of 2020. Current Republican Governor Jim Justice is running for his 2nd term in the state against an undetermined Democratic opponent. Little bit of extra information about Jim Justice. He is a lifelong Republican, but from 2015 to 2017, he was a registered Democrat, and it was during 2016 that he ran for his 1st term. So even though he's the Republican governor from West Virginia, he actually ran on the Democratic ticket that year, meaning that West Virginians voted for a Democrat for governor. As we now know, though, he switched back to the Republican Party about a year after winning his 1st term. So this November is actually the first time that he is running as a Republican in the state. As of this video, Jim Justice's approval rating is at -1 point. Specifically, he has the approval of about 43% of West Virginians and the disapproval of about 44% of West Virginians. -1 point isn't terrible, but of course it's not great either. Let's keep that approval rating in the back of our mind when we look at gubernatorial to House turnout ratio numbers. Let's bring those up right now. And there you have it. These numbers actually did shock me the first time I saw them. Considering how friendly West Virginia is to Republicans running for congressional seats and for the presidency in recent years, Democrats running for the governorship in the state just seem to inspire something more in the average West Virginian voter. Remember that Jim Justice ran as a Democrat in 2016, so that 156.25 voter turnout ratio was actually for him. He won that election that year by about 7 to 8% of voters. So even with a voter turnout ratio more than double that of his opponent, he didn't even manage to win by more than 10%. This race in West Virginia is particularly a bit of a head scratcher for me. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how a governor that switched parties is going to perform in the state that initially elected him as a Democrat. But let's take what we know about his approval rating, about raw voter turnout, and about the voter ratios and calculate whether or not we think Jim Justice, the Republican, is going to win a 2nd term. Polbot, can you please? Thank you. Yeah, what? Okay, Polbot is telling me that Jim Justice, the Republican in West Virginia, is going to lose his re-election bid this year. We don't even know yet who he's running against, but the numbers have him losing by about 8.94% of the vote. This prediction and margin of victory is the result of the fact that West Virginia has not elected a Republican governor since 1996, despite having one right now. When we combine the massive advantage for Democrats' turnout ratio coupled with his -1 approval rating, and considering history as a guide, this race just doesn't look good for Jim Justice according to the numbers. I have yet to find a legitimate pollster predicting this, but maybe I'm the first, I don't know. So in what seems like an upset, we have Jim Justice losing his bid for re-election as governor in the state. Let's make that official and put it on our gubernatorial map. Mark it. And now it is time to talk about the presidential election of 2020, starring President Donald Trump and likely Democratic challenger Joe Biden. West Virginia is a state that has not gone for a Democratic candidate for the presidency once during the 21st century. It's also one of the states that overwhelmingly approves of Donald Trump's performance as president. As of this video, he is enjoying a net approval rating of plus 24 points in West Virginia. So he has every reason to feel optimistic about carrying the state's 5 electoral college votes. Still, we have to look at how West Virginians vote for their president. Let's pull up some more numbers. And there you have it, and there are no surprises here to me anyway. Republican candidates in the state have the advantage in voter turnout ratios. Those numbers have been hovering around 108, 109% going back to 2010. Whereas Democratic candidates have a voter turnout ratio of less than 100% and actually decreasing from 92 to 84 from 2012 to 2016. So their enthusiasm is actually going down. Okay, so we have Donald Trump being overwhelmingly approved of in the state. We have good turnout ratio numbers for him. We have high turnout for Republican candidates running in the House. Let's combine all that and get the answer that we are all expecting. Please, Polbot, thank you. And there it is, Donald Trump winning West Virginia for a 2nd time by about 25.39% of voters. West Virginia is probably one of the earliest states of the night that is going to be called in November, and we can all feel confident that Donald Trump is going to carry it. So let's make that official and put it on our presidential map. Mark it. So all the results are in for West Virginia. Let's talk briefly about the future of West Virginia's politics. So looking at the raw voter turnout for House candidates in the state, we see slopes that are respectively positive for Republicans and negative for Democrats. Over the last 10 years, we see that gap increasing, and I have every reason to believe that that will continue due to Donald Trump's high approval rating in the state. What I'd like to spend a little more time talking about are these estimated slopes for those three different voter turnout ratios that we were using in our calculations. Starting with the Senatorial to House voter turnout ratio, we see a pretty stark decrease in the enthusiasm for Democrats and an increase in that for Republicans. This accounts for voter turnout data going back to 2010, and what this tells me is that come time when Joe Manchin does or does not run for another term in 2024, I don't think he's going to be able to win that seat again. And if he retires and another Democrat decides to run, then that guy, whoever he or she may be, is definitely not going to win. Bottom line, West Virginia can enjoy or not enjoy a Democratic senator for another 4 years tops. If we divert our attention now to the gubernatorial to House turnout ratio slope estimates, we see actually Democrats increasing their voter turnout ratios. The more I look at this graph and consider the fact that West Virginia has not elected a Republican to the governorship since 1996, it makes more sense that Jim Justice will not be reelected this year. I just find it troubling that I'm the only one predicting this, but we'll see how it turns out. And finally, when we look at the presidential to House voter turnout ratio slope estimates, we see slopes of nearly zero for both parties. However, the Republicans' value is just above zero and the Democrats' value is just below zero. These changes in voter turnout ratios, coupled with the increase in voter turnout for Republicans over Democrats in the state, means that West Virginia is likely to continue to vote Republican in presidential elections for many, many years to come. So my final consensus on West Virginia, it is a pretty Republican stronghold, yet an anomaly when it comes to the governorship of the state. It's honestly purely coincidental that I just did Vermont and now I'm doing this state. They're both anomalies in the sense that they go one way for about every race except the governorship. One might say that West Virginia and Vermont are political opposites. The state is becoming more Republican, but may still yet elect more Democrats to the governorship in years to come. And that just about does it for our most recent episode of Elections by Numbers. I want to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in today. If you like what you saw, please hit that subscribe button so you can get updates on new content as it becomes available. I upload videos every Monday and Thursday. I'm also on Twitter, and I update that account with which state I'm going to be covering next ahead of the scheduled release date. So if you want to stay ahead of the curve, please give me a follow on Twitter. That link is in the description. Thanks again for watching, and thank you for voting. See you next time.